Hi folks, today I'm not doing a video about a watch. Today what I'm going to do is an introductory video teaching people about the hobby. It comes to my attention that a lot of people born, well, a long time after me, didn't grow up with getting watches for their Christmases and birthdays. In fact, the only watches they may have seen were on their fathers and grandfathers' wrists, and they may not have shown much interest in them since the smartphone in their pocket told them all they wanted to know. But quite a lot of young people are sort of coming round to watches with sort of entry drugs like the Apple Watch, and are getting interested in the hobby. But you just don't know stuff. So this video here is designed to be a basic introduction to horology, and what I'm going to talk about today is the different types of movement and a sort of really quick introduction to how it all started. So anyway, let's get into it. Now this is not a watch, everybody can see that, but the starting point here is when I was a kid, everybody's granny had one of those on the mantelpiece. This is a clock, and there's a couple of reasons why this is still running after all these years, and the main one is that it's mature technology. You hear it ticking. What's actually happening is that in the back here, and when I moved it, it stopped. That pendulum rocking back and forward is converting the energy from the spring in the movement and turning into beats, which enable the hands to be slowly moved around the dial. Anyway, the fact that it has a pendulum is why it stopped when I turned the clock around. So you can't turn one of these into a watch, because you can't miniaturise that and have people walking around with them, because every time they get shifted around they'll lose some time. So what happens with one of these watches, clocks, is that you wind it up using a key. One of these is to wind the mainspring, and one of these is to wind the chime. And then they tick away quite the thing, provided you leave them in one place. Now the first thing they got rid of was the pendulum, using a mechanical escapement instead. And the mechanical escapement, invented actually hundreds of years ago, is what enabled miniaturisation, to turn a little thing like this into a much smaller thing like that. The second thing they had to get rid of was the key. So two things had to be invented to make the modern watch. First of all, no pendulum, a mechanical escapement, and second, a keyless winding mechanism. Yeah, no key built in. This is an American pocket watch, a Waltham, from the Waltham Watch Company of Massachusetts. Now this watch is over 100 years old, and it still shows many of the innovations over the last few centuries are incorporated in this watch. Basically, this is a miniaturised clock that's possible for a person to carry around with them. And this was really how watches started. Queen Elizabeth I in the 1500s had a wearable watch, and it probably was mechanically not too different from this Waltham pocket watch, although it had been refined to the stage where these were actually fairly accurate and were used in the railways and things like that. Now I'll show you the movement. You can lift the back here. Absolutely beautiful. You see that? And what you can see there is you can see the mechanical escapement working. Now, smaller versions of this watch movement are still in use today. This is a mechanical watch movement. Now, you can see as I turn the winder, you can see the mainspring is being wound up by these, and the pressure built up in the mainspring is being released in pulses by this balance wheel here. And that's the essence of the mechanical watch movement, which all that time ago is still pretty much the same today, with a couple of innovations, which I'll show you in a minute. Now, in World War I, well, actually, it's not true. Everybody thinks World War I was where wristwatches started, but they actually started right enough with the military, but the military in the late 19th century, the sort of colonial wars of the British Empire, officers started to wear watches on their wrists, and that evolved into the wristwatch. And here we have a mechanical wristwatch. Now, this one isn't from the immediate period after the Great War. The Great War's significant because millions of soldiers returned home wearing wristwatches, and wristwatches then overshadowed the pocket watch in popularity and became the watch for the masses as well as for the wealthy. Now, this wristwatch is from the 1950s, and inside here there's a much smaller version of that same movement that we saw in the Waltham pocket watch. Hasn't changed very much at all. You can see that there's still a subdial with the second indicator there, which I've always been a sucker for. I really like these. But the point I'm trying to make is that mechanical watch movements are pretty much unchanged over the last 100 years. They just got a little bit smaller to be incorporated in wristwatches. Now, watch purists like mechanical movements, and mechanical movements are considered way superior to quartz movements by aficionados, by many aficionados anyway, although I personally am neutral on the issue. I think there's some wonderful quartz movements have been made, and you can't really stand in the way of progress. As I've been saying, this technology is hundreds of years old now. Anyway, that's the mechanical wristwatch. The next evolution in the stage was every morning you have to wind. You set this wristwatch, because usually I've lost a minute or so during the day. In the morning, you wind this wristwatch up, lasts you all day, you go to bed, in the morning you wake up, you wind it up again, and that's how it goes. That's how it accompanies you through your life. And a lot of people enjoy, I personally really enjoy, the interaction with the watch that you get from that. Anyway, there was a development after this, which removes all that need for all that tiresome winding, as people would have it, and I'll show you that next. This here is an automatic wristwatch, sometimes called a self-winding wristwatch. Now, you can still wind this one up. Just to initially set it, you set it and then you wind it up just like the mechanical wristwatch. But what's happening here is that as you move through the day, this watch will wind itself up and will keep itself wound up. So you don't have to wind it every day, provided, and this is the important bit, provided you're wearing the watch and moving around. And I'll show you how they do that. This is an automatic mechanical wristwatch movement. Now, do you see the balance wheel spinning round there? Just like in the Waltham pocket watch. But the difference is this bit here. This innovation was brought in to wind the watch up. As you move, this weight shifts around like this. Now, some of the best ones will wind the watch moving clockwise or anti-clockwise. Others, they only wind in one direction. But the point is, as you're moving around through the day, that's happening, and as that's happening, it's winding the watch up for you and keeping it wound. So there are no batteries involved here, but this is what is meant by an automatic watch. This is how an automatic watch works, and this is how it stays wound. Now, one of the things that you should think about if you're buying a watch for your grandpa or something like that, if he's not too mobile, it might not wind up to the extent that he will have to wind it himself occasionally, every few days or whatever. But essentially, if someone's normally active and they're wearing this watch, it'll keep the watch running all the time. You can get watch winders that rotate your watch while you're not wearing them to keep them fully wound, but really all you have to do is a little turn of the winder and you've wound your watch up, and that's it, ready to go. I've never found setting a watch tiresome. As I've mentioned, I quite enjoy interacting with watches. Now, in the late 1960s, another innovation came along. Now, the timing beat is kept by this watch by this balance wheel turning, and it's using the energy that's in a spring and producing beats which move the second hand along. And all the gearing in the watch is designed to make the second hand move around 1 minute for a complete revolution. You don't have to have a second hand, obviously, that's geared to make the minute hand and the hour hand move as well. But there you are, that's an automatic watch movement. But in the late 1960s, these things came along. Now this is a quartz movement. Now quartz watches, the innovation here is that they discovered that a crystal of quartz, if you apply an electric current to it, vibrates at a certain frequency. And with some electronic McGubbins, what you can do is you can count the pulses of the vibration and translate that into pulses that are moving the watch along. You see this, the watch is moving here 1 second at a time with the second hand. Quartz watches have an advantage over mechanical watches in that they are way more accurate. A quartz movement, a cheap quartz movement, will probably be more accurate than an expensive, handmade, hand-assembled mechanical watch. It's just a fact. They're also cheaper to make and cheaper to mass produce, and those facts nearly destroyed the mechanical watch industry in the 1970s. They call it the quartz crisis, and it almost ended watchmaking in Switzerland. This is a quartz watch, and I'll show you the inside of a quartz watch. This here is a quartz watch, and if you have a look, you can see there's hardly anything moving at all. There's a little wheel you can see moving in the centre, which is moving the second hand of this watch. But a lot of them, there's no visible movement on the back of the movement at all. It's all internalised. Sometimes you can see a cog going round. Sometimes you can't. But this watch uses a battery, so the energy is not stored in a wound spring, it's stored in a battery, and that produces the electric current which goes through the crystal, vibrates the crystal, those are counted, and also produces the little pulses that move the watch along. Now, with these things, there is not a lot of torque available. So with a mechanical watch, you often see quite chunky hands, but with a quartz watch, although these hands look similar to ones on a rather famous brand of mechanical watch, they're actually very thin. I don't know if the camera's picking that up. Almost foil-like in their construction. They're thin, they're made thin so they'll be very light, so that the quartz movement has enough oomph to turn the hands. But quartz movements here are the thing that basically changed the watch industry. They made watches cheaper. People could buy watches for a lot more reasonably priced, which obviously as cheap watch chaps we like, but they made them in a way an everyman product. A watch was less of a special purchase than it used to be. It used to be you had to hand make watches, and that was the basis of the industry and the basis of the pricing model. This innovation turned everything on its head and changed everything. But it's not the end of the story. Quartz movements themselves have evolved over time. The next thing I want to show you is this. Now, this is a quartz watch, but it's a quartz watch with a solar charging system in it. Now, inside here, the watchmakers do not like to call them batteries. They call them capacitors or something like that. But inside here, you have what is essentially a rechargeable watch battery. And this rechargeable watch battery gets charged by light, any light that goes through the watch face. Now, the watch face is, you can't really see, but it is translucent, not solid, and light can travel through that. Now, Citizen have an extensive range of watches called EcoDrive watches, which employ this technology, but Seiko and a number of others, including Tag Heuer. This Tag Heuer here, made in titanium, beautiful watch. It uses a solar quartz movement, not dissimilar in any way to the one that's here inside the Seiko or inside the Citizen, although the price tag is a little more. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little march through time, and although it's dead straightforward, the information that I've shown here, it'll let you see what's meant when people talk about mechanical watches, quartz watches, the quartz crisis, all that sort of stuff. This is a little introduction to horology for my viewers. Till the next time, bye-bye for now. No, Hamish, we can't afford any of the good treats, not until more viewers like, subscribe and comment on the videos. And then you can get the nice ones.